The station called 7 floated in the empty space between 3 star systems, and it belonged to no one. This made it perfect for the Galactic Coalition's annual joint military exercises, where dozens of species came together to show their strength and skill. For 60 cycles, the same species had won the precision shooting competition. They were tall and thin, with 4 eyes that could track movement across impossible distances. They never missed. They were proud of this fact and made sure everyone knew it. Lieutenant Commander Burton stood at the edge of the observation deck with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a calm man with short brown hair and steady eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Beside him stood Sergeant, a woman of average height with dark hair pulled back tight. She carried her rifle case with the ease of someone who had held such weapons since childhood. Neither of them spoke as they watched the team complete their demonstration. The targets were small spheres that moved in random patterns across a field of holographic obstacles. The shooters hit every single one in the center. The watching crowd of alien diplomats and military officers applauded with various sounds and gestures depending on their biology. Ambassador Al, the leader of the delegation, turned his long neck to look at the human observers. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that had learned meant amusement mixed with contempt. "The young species from Earth are here to learn, yes," Al said, his voice carrying across the deck. "Perhaps watching true marksmen will teach them something." Smiled politely and said nothing. His expression did not change at all. Fleet Commander approached the human delegation. He was a species that resembled what humans might call a bear if that bear stood 8 feet tall and had scales instead of fur. Despite his frightening appearance, was known as a fair leader who judged species by their actions rather than their reputations. He had pushed for human inclusion in these exercises when many others had voted against it. "Your turn comes next," said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Are your people ready?" "We are," replied. "I hope you understand what is at stake. A poor performance today will give ammunition to those who wish to keep humanity in support roles forever." Nodded, "We understand completely." Stepped forward to the shooting platform. The crowd grew quiet, though could hear whispered conversations in a dozen different languages. Most of them were placing bets on how badly the human would fail. He heard odds being offered of 20 to 1 that she would not hit a single center target. The targets activated. Small spheres began dancing through the holographic maze, moving faster and more randomly than they had for the. Noticed this immediately. Someone had adjusted the difficulty settings. He looked at Al and saw the ambassador's 4 eyes watching with obvious pleasure. Raised her rifle, she took her first shot. The sphere she had apparently aimed at continued moving untouched. Her shot struck a point in empty space to the left of the target field. The crowd murmured. Fired again. Another miss. This time she hit a spot near the ceiling of the target area, nowhere close to any sphere. Laughter began spreading through the observers. The delegation made no effort to hide their amusement. Al's thin mouth stretched into what served as a smile for his species. Shot after shot continued firing. Each time her shots went wide. She hit the floor of the target area. She hit the walls. She hit support structures and empty corners. Not once did she come close to striking a moving sphere. When her ammunition was spent, the score display showed 0 successful hits. The laughter was now open and loud. Several species were making gestures of mockery that did not need translation. Al stepped forward, his voice projected across the entire deck. "This is what Earth sends to represent humanity, a soldier who cannot hit a simple moving target." He turned to address the full assembly. "I move that we reconsider human membership in combat operations. Clearly, they lack the basic physical capability for warfare. They should be restricted to cargo transport and station maintenance." Several delegates voiced agreement. Noticed that was frowning, but the fleet commander said nothing yet. "Lieutenant Commander Burton," Al continued, turning his 4 eyes on, Do you have anything to say in defense of this embarrassing display?" Burton smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and unconcerned. "Sergeant performed exactly as expected. I have no complaints." This response confused the assembly. Whispers spread as diplomats tried to understand if the human was joking or simply stupid. "You expected her to miss every target?" Al asked. "I expected her to hit what she was aiming at," said, "and she did, every single time." More confusion. A officer called out, "The score clearly shows 0 hits. Your soldier is either blind or incompetent." "The score shows 0 target hits," agreed. But Sergeant was never shooting at the targets. Silence fell across the deck. Even Al seemed unsure how to respond. Stepped closer, his massive head tilting as he studied the target area. Watched the fleet commander's eyes move across the points where shots had landed. Floor, walls, support structures, ceiling corners. A pattern was there, but you had to know how to look for it. "What game are you playing, human?" Al demanded. "No game," said. "Just a different way of thinking about problems. You see, Ambassador, where I come from, we learned long ago that sometimes the best way to catch something is not to chase it directly." Al's 4 eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." "I would rather show you, if the coalition is willing to arrange a proper demonstration. Looked at. A simulation exercise, perhaps. Human tactics against tactics. Let us prove what we can do when we are actually trying." The fleet commander was still staring at the pattern of shot marks had left behind. Something about them clearly bothered him. After a long moment, he shook his head slightly, as if dismissing a strange thought. "An interesting proposal," said. "Ambassador Al, do you accept?" The diplomat laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping. "Gladly. Let the humans embarrass themselves completely. Then there will be no more debate about their proper place in this coalition." Bowed his head politely. "We look forward to it." As the crowd dispersed, rejoined at the observation deck, her expression was still perfectly calm. "They adjusted the difficulty to make it harder," she said quietly. "I noticed. It did not matter. I hit all 37 points you marked." Nodded. "I know, you always do." Allowed herself a small smile. "They have no idea what is coming, do they?" "No," said, watching Al's retreating form. "They really do not." The diplomatic reception hall on 7 glittered with lights that shifted colors to accommodate the visual ranges of different species. Long tables held food and drink suitable for dozens of alien biologies, and servants moved quietly between groups of talking diplomats. Burton stood near a window that looked out at the stars, holding a glass of water he had not touched. Captain Shaw approached him. Shaw was an older man with gray at his temples and deep lines around his eyes that came from years of difficult decisions. He commanded the human vessel Resolute, the only Earthship currently stationed in Coalition space. His dress uniform was crisp and perfect, but his expression showed worry. "That was quite a performance," Shaw said quietly. "Care to explain what you and were actually doing out there?" "Setting the stage," replied. "They needed to underestimate us completely. They certainly do that now. Half the delegates think humans are a joke. The other half think we are too stupid to realize we are a joke." "Good, that is exactly what we need." Shaw studied his tactical officer for a long moment. "You have a plan. Something you have not shared with me yet." "I have the beginning of a plan. I need Dr. Price's analysis before I can complete it." As if summoned by her name, Dr. Price joined them. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick movements, and she served as the Resolute's combat analyst. Her job was to study enemy tactics and find weaknesses. She had been doing this job for 15 years and was very good at it. "I have been watching training recordings for 6 months, she said without greeting. "I found something interesting." "Tell me," said. "They have no concept of indirect combat. None at all. Every single military doctrine is based on direct engagement. see target, shoot target, hit target. That is how they think. They never use traps, ambushes. They use what they call ambushes, but even those involve hiding and then shooting directly at enemies. The idea of manipulating an environment to create a delayed or chain reaction does not exist in their tactical thinking. I checked their language. They do not even have a word for it. Shaw frowned. How is that possible? Every species we have encountered uses some form of indirect warfare. They evolved as apex predators on a world with very little environmental variety. Open plains, clear, fast prey that could only be caught with perfect accuracy. They never needed to develop trap thinking because they could always just hit what they were aiming at. Nodded slowly. So if we force them into a situation where direct shooting does not solve the problem, they will not know how to adapt. That is my conclusion, yes. Before Shaw could respond, a new voice interrupted them. You should know that Al has been planning this challenge for months. They turned to find a young officer standing nearby. She was smaller than most of her species, with scales that held a slight blue tint rather than the usual gray. Her 4 eyes watched them without the contempt that seemed standard for her people. Sub-Commander, Shaw said carefully, should you be speaking with us? Probably not, but I find Al's arrogance tiresome, and I believe the coalition benefits from diversity of thought. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. The simulation tomorrow has been designed to be nearly impossible for your pilots. The asteroid field will be configured to give ships every advantage. Navigation will be difficult. Sensor range will be limited. And the victory conditions have been set so that you must eliminate our entire force to win, while we only need to destroy 60% of yours. Why are you telling us this? Asked. Because I want to see what happens when humans are pushed into a corner. Every species has hidden depths. I am curious about yours. She walked away before they could respond, disappearing into the crowd of diplomats. Shaw exhaled slowly. Well, that complicates things. Actually, said, it simplifies them. Now we know what we are facing. The odds are stacked against us. We will be fighting in an environment designed to favor their strengths. Yes, which means we need to change what the fight is actually about. Dr. Price tilted her head. What do you mean? Al thinks we will try to beat thee at their own game, direct combat, shooting at ships. That is the fight he has prepared for. Set down his untouched glass of water. So we will not give him that fight. We will give him a different one entirely. What kind of fight? The kind our ancestors used to bring down mammoths with pointed sticks. The kind that takes patience, planning, and an understanding that sometimes you do not need to hit your enemy at all. Shaw and Price exchanged looks. Neither fully understood what meant, but they had worked with him long enough to trust his instincts. What do you need? Shaw asked. I need to modify her targeting systems. I need detailed scans of that asteroid field, and I need our pilots to practice missing on purpose. Missing on purpose. Every shot needs to hit exactly where I tell them to hit, not at enemy ships, not at obvious targets, at specific points that will seem completely random to anyone watching. Dr. Price's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. You want to use the asteroids themselves. I want to turn the entire battlefield into a weapon that will be so focused on shooting at us that they will never notice what we are shooting at. By the time they realize what is happening, they will be trapped in a cage of their own making. Shaw was quiet for a long moment, then he laughed softly. They have no idea who they are dealing with. No, agreed. They really do not, and that is exactly why we are going to win. That night, aboard the Resolute, the human crew worked without rest, studied asteroid mass calculations and gravitational vectors. The pilots ran simulation after simulation, learning to hit precise points while making it look like they were simply bad at aiming. Dr. Price compiled everything known about tactical responses. and Burton stood alone on the observation deck, watching the asteroid field that would become their battlefield. Somewhere out there, Al was probably celebrating his coming victory. The ambassador had no doubt that tomorrow would prove human inferiority once and for all. Smiled in the darkness, tomorrow would prove something, but it would not be what Al expected. The asteroid field stretched across 300,000 kilometers of space, a graveyard of ancient rocks that had been drifting since the birth of the star system. The Coalition had converted it into their primary combat simulation zone decades ago. Sensors throughout the field could track every ship, every weapon, every movement. Hits were recorded and damage was calculated by computer. No one actually died, but careers could be ended by a poor performance. Ensign sat in the cockpit of his fighter and tried to calm his breathing. He was 24 years old, and this was the most important day of his life. Through his canopy, he could see the other human fighters forming up, 12 ships in total against the force of 12. Equal numbers on paper, but they had 4 eyes each, reflexes twice as fast as humans, and 60 years of undefeated performance in these exercises. The voice of Weapons Officer Lisa Grant came through his communication system. All pilots, remember your assignments. Every shot matters, but not in the way you are used to. Trust the coordinates provided. Trust the timing. Looked at his targeting display. It showed a list of points scattered throughout the asteroid field. None of them were anywhere near where the ships would be positioned. He had practiced hitting these points for hours last night. It still felt wrong to aim at empty space while enemies were shooting at him. In the command center aboard the Resolute, Captain Shaw and Burton watched the display screens that showed the entire battlefield. Observer Prime stood with them, a representative of the ancient species. There were neutral arbiters in all coalition disputes. They were thin and pale, with large dark eyes that seemed to see everything. An interesting formation, or said in a voice like wind through dry leaves. Your fighters are not positioned for optimal engagement. They are positioned for our strategy, replied. Which is? You will see. The countdown reached 0. The simulation began. They moved immediately, their ships darting through the asteroid field with practiced precision. They split into hunting pairs, a standard formation that allowed them to cover each other while maximizing their firing opportunities. Their targeting systems locked onto human ships instantly. All human pilots begin evasive maneuvers, Lisa Grant commanded. Execute firing pattern Alpha. Pulled his fighter into a sharp turn as weapons fire streaked past his canopy. The simulation registered a near miss. He found his first assigned coordinate on the targeting display, a point on a medium-sized asteroid 3 kilometers to his left. He fired. His shot hit the rock exactly where intended. Nothing visible happened. Around him, the other human pilots were doing the same thing, firing and apparently missing. Shots struck asteroids, empty space, the surfaces of distant rocks. Not a single human weapon came close to a ship. In the observation gallery, dozens of alien diplomats watched the battle unfold. Laughter began almost immediately. This is even worse than yesterday, someone said. They cannot hit anything. Al watched with all 4 eyes gleaming in satisfaction. I told you, humans lack the basic capability for combat. Look at them. They are firing wildly in panic. The ships pressed their advantage. 2 human fighters took simulated hits and began trailing false smoke to indicate damage. Narrowly avoided being the third, diving beneath an asteroid just as weapons fire passed through where he had been. You are off schedule, Lisa Grant's voice said. You missed coordinate 7, circle back. I am taking fire here, replied through gritted teeth. I know, circle back anyway, hit coordinate 7. Cursed under his breath but obeyed. He looped his fighter around the asteroid, taking another glancing hit that his computer registered as minor hull damage. The pilot pursuing him was clearly toying with him, enjoying the chase. Ignored the enemy ship entirely. He found Coordinate 7, a specific point on a small asteroid that seemed no different from any other. He fired. Hit confirmed. Good, Lisa Grant said. Now proceed to Coordinate 12. In the observation gallery, betting pools had formed. The current odds were 50-1 that humans would be completely eliminated within 10 minutes. No one was betting on a human victory. Or watched the battle with growing interest. They had observed thousands of military engagements across their long existence. Something about this one felt different. The human shots were not wild or panicked. They were precise. Each one hit something, even if that something was just a rock. Your pilots are taking significant damage, or observed. Nodded they are. Yet they continue firing at seemingly random points, rather than defending themselves. Yes. This is intentional. Yes. The ancient said nothing more, but continued watching with those large dark eyes that missed nothing. 5 minutes into the simulation, 3 human fighters had been eliminated and 2 more were heavily damaged. They had not lost a single ship. Al was already preparing his victory speech. Then Lisa Grant spoke quietly into her communication system. All pilots, Phase 1 complete, fall back to defensive positions. Acknowledge. One by one, the surviving human fighters confirmed. They began retreating toward the edge of the asteroid field, grouping together in what looked like a desperate last stand. They are running, a pilot reported with contempt. Should we pursue? Al's voice came through the command channel. Yes, end this quickly, show no mercy. The ships accelerated in pursuit, weaving through the asteroids with perfect grace. They were confident. They were certain. They had already won. In the command center, Burton watched the enemy ships enter the heart of the asteroid field. Every single one of them passed through zones that human weapons had struck over the past 5 minutes. Captain Shaw leaned close. Is it time? Checked his calculations one final time. Trajectories, masses, gravitational influences. Every shot his pilots had fired was now doing exactly what he had planned. Yes, he said, it is time. He opened a channel to Lisa Grant. Execute Phase 2. Lisa Grant smiled and relayed the order to, who sat in a specially modified fighter at the edge of the battlefield. Had not fired a single shot yet. She had been waiting. She raised her rifle, custom-built for this moment, and aimed at a small rock no bigger than a human fist. It was 40 kilometers away. It was tumbling slowly through space, and it was positioned exactly where she needed it. She fired. The shot crossed the distance in less than a second. It struck the small rock and shattered it into fragments. Those fragments, traveling at high speed, struck a larger asteroid that human weapons had weakened 5 minutes ago. That asteroid cracked and began to drift. Its new trajectory carried it toward another asteroid, and another, and another. A chain reaction had begun. The first pilot to realize something was wrong was a veteran named. He had been chasing a human fighter through a narrow gap between 2 large asteroids when his sensors detected movement that should not have existed. The asteroids were drifting, not in their normal slow paths, but faster in new directions, closing the gap he had just flown through. Command, I am detecting unusual asteroid movement, reported. Ignore it, Al replied dismissively. Focus on the targets. We are about to achieve complete victory. But was a careful pilot who had survived 30 years of combat by paying attention to his surroundings. He pulled up his tactical display and expanded the view to show the entire asteroid field. What he saw made his 4 eyes widen in shock. Dozens of asteroids were moving. Some were drifting slowly, others were tumbling faster, and they were all moving in the same general direction, converging toward a central point in the field. That central point was exactly where the pursuit force had gathered. Command, we have a serious problem, said, his voice suddenly urgent. The asteroids. Someone has redirected the asteroids. In the observation gallery, the laughter had stopped. Alien diplomats were staring at the tactical displays with growing confusion. The betting pools had gone silent. "What is happening?" someone asked. "The rocks are moving," another voice said. "But that is impossible. Asteroids do not simply change course." Or the observer made a soft sound that might have been admiration. "Not impossible. Improbable, but not impossible. If you knew exactly where to apply force, exactly how much energy to transfer, exactly which trajectories to alter, you could create a cascade effect. But that would require calculating hundreds of variables in real time during combat," Al protested. "No species could do that." "Apparently one species can." On the battlefield, the pilots were finally understanding their situation. The asteroids were forming a sphere around them. Gaps that had been open moments ago were closing. Escape routes were disappearing. And more rocks were coming, pushed by the ones behind them, which were pushed by others, all originating from points that human weapons had struck during the first phase of the battle. "Break formation," the flight leader ordered. "Find exit vectors. Get out of the convergence zone." The pilots tried. They were the best in the coalition, with reflexes and accuracy unmatched by any other species. But their skills were designed for hitting targets, not for navigating through a closing maze of tumbling rocks. Every path they calculated was blocked by another asteroid drifting into position. Took another shot from her position at the edge of the battlefield. This one struck a boulder that had been slowly spinning for millions of years. The impact changed its rotation by a fraction of a degree. That tiny change sent it into the path of another rock, which deflected into a third, which created a new wave of movement that sealed another escape route. "This is madness," a pilot shouted. "They are not shooting at us. They are shooting at rocks. Why are they shooting at rocks?" "Because the rocks are the weapon," Lisa Grant replied calmly over an open channel. "They always were." In the command center, Burton watched his plan unfold exactly as calculated. Dr. Price had provided the behavioral predictions. The navigation team had mapped every asteroid's mass and trajectory, had made the impossible shots. The pilots had hit their coordinates even while taking damage. And now the trap was closing. "Al is demanding we stop the simulation," Captain Shaw reported. "He claims we are cheating." "We are not," said. "Every action we have taken is within the rules. Check with the observer." Or was already reviewing the regulations. There is no prohibition against environmental manipulation. There is no rule requiring participants to fire only at enemy vessels. The humans have broken no laws. Al's voice came through the command channel, angry and desperate. "This is not combat. This is trickery." "This is tactics," replied. "There is a difference between the two, though I understand if your species has difficulty recognizing it." The observation gallery was completely silent now. Every diplomat was watching the tactical display, where the fleet was trapped in an ever-shrinking cage of stone. Human fighters had pulled back to safe positions outside the convergence zone. They were no longer firing at all. They did not need to. "Can they shoot their way out?" someone asked. Dr. Price answered. "No. Their weapons are designed for precision strikes against small targets. They could destroy individual asteroids, but there are too many, and destroying them would only create more debris moving in the same directions. The physics are against them." "Can they fly out?" "The gaps are too narrow now, and closing rapidly. Any attempt would result in collision." The pilots were discovering this for themselves. One tried to thread through a narrowing passage and clipped an asteroid with his wing. The simulation registered catastrophic damage. Another attempted to blast through a smaller rock and found herself pelted by the fragments. More damage. Al watched his undefeated fleet being crushed without a single human weapon touching them. His 4 eyes darted between screens, searching for some solution, some counter-strategy. But there was nothing in doctrine for this situation, nothing in their history, nothing in their imagination. They did this on purpose, he said slowly, horror creeping into his voice. From the very beginning, the demonstration yesterday, they were showing us that they could hit precise points. We laughed, we mocked them, and they were telling us exactly what they planned to do. And you never considered it a threat or observed. Because in your thinking, hitting a target means hitting an enemy. The concept of hitting something that would eventually reach the enemy does not exist for your people. Took one final shot. It was the most difficult one, traveling nearly 60 kilometers to strike a small rock that was tumbling at high speed. The impact sent that rock into a massive asteroid at the center of the convergence zone. The massive asteroid began to rotate. Its new movement pulled nearby rocks with its gravitational influence, accelerating the collapse of the cage. Within 30 seconds, every remaining ship was surrounded on all sides. The simulation computers calculated that escape was now mathematically impossible. One by one, the pilots signaled their surrender, something that had never happened in 60 years of these exercises. The tactical display updated, human victory. In the observation gallery, silence stretched for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began. Not from everyone. Some species were too shocked to respond. Others were frightened by what they had witnessed. But many recognized that they had just seen something new, something that changed their understanding of what combat could be. Captain Shaw allowed himself a small smile. We did it. Burton nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. This was only the first step. Now we have to convince them that humanity is worth having as an ally, not just feared as an enemy. You think that will be difficult? Watched Al's face on the ambassador looked like someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just collapsed. I think, said, that we have given them a lot to think about. 1 week after the simulation, the Coalition Council chambers were filled to capacity. Representatives from every member species had gathered for what promised to be a historic session. The news of the human victory had spread across Coalition space, and opinions varied wildly. Some called it genius, others called it dangerous. A few suggested that humanity should be expelled from the Coalition entirely before they turned their strange way of thinking against everyone else. Burton stood at the speaker's platform with Captain Shaw, Dr. Price, and beside him. They wore their formal uniforms and maintained the calm expressions that had become their trademark. Across the chamber, Al sat with the delegation, his 4 eyes fixed on the humans with an emotion that was difficult to read. Fleet Commander called the session to order. His massive form dominated the central podium, and his voice silenced the murmuring crowd instantly. We are here to discuss the results of the joint military exercise and determine what status humanity should hold within the coalition, announced. Before we proceed to debate, I have asked Dr. Price to present an analysis of human tactical methodology. Doctor, you may begin. Dr. Price stepped forward. She had prepared for this moment carefully, knowing that the future of human coalition relations depended on helping these species understand something that seemed obvious to humans, but was completely foreign to most of them. Thank you, Fleet Commander. I want to begin by explaining why humans think the way we do. It is not superior intelligence. It is not technology. It is evolution. She activated a holographic display showing a primitive human hunting a mammoth. Our ancestors were not the strongest creatures on our world. They were not the fastest. They did not have claws or fangs or venom. What they had was patience, creativity, and the ability to think many steps ahead. They learned to build traps. They learned to use the environment as a weapon. They learned that sometimes the best way to catch something is not to chase it directly, but to make it come to you. The display changed to show the asteroid field simulation. What you witnessed in the exercise was not a new tactic. It was an ancient one. We call it trap thinking. Instead of focusing on the immediate target, we focus on creating conditions that make the target defeat itself. The pilots were never our enemies in that battle. The asteroids were never just obstacles. Everything in that environment was a tool waiting to be used. She paused to let this sink in. This is why our pilots seemed to miss their targets. They were not missing. They were hitting exactly what they intended to hit. Every shot served a purpose that would not become clear until minutes later. This kind of thinking is so natural to humans that we do not even consider it unusual. But I understand now that for many species, it represents a completely different way of approaching problems. The chamber was silent. Dr. Price returned to her position beside. Spoke again. I must confess something to this assembly. During the initial demonstration, when Sergeant appeared to miss every target, I noticed that her shots formed a pattern. I dismissed my observation because I could not imagine what purpose such a pattern might serve. I was wrong to dismiss it. I underestimated human thinking, and I apologize. This admission from the fleet commander caused a stir among the delegates. Sub-Commander rose from her seat among the delegation. I request permission to speak, Fleet Commander. Granted. Stepped forward and noticed that Al's 4 eyes followed her with obvious displeasure. I have served the military for 12 years, said. In that time, I have been taught that our way of combat is the only correct way. See target, shoot target, hit target. This has served us well. But watching the humans showed me that there are other ways to think about problems, ways that we never considered. I am not suggesting we abandon methods. I am suggesting that we have much to learn from humanity. With permission, I would like to request transfer to a human vessel to study their tactical philosophy. The murmuring in the chamber grew louder. A requesting to serve with another species was nearly unprecedented. Al stood abruptly. This is absurd. One simulation victory does not prove anything. The humans use trickery, not skill. Stepped forward. Ambassador, may I respond? Nodded. What you call trickery, we call strategy. What you call luck, we call planning. Every shot fired during that simulation was calculated months in advance. Dr. Price studied your tactics. Our navigation team mapped every asteroid. Our pilots trained specifically to hit the points I designated. And Sergeant made shots that your best marksman could not dream of attempting. He paused. You mock us for not hitting targets directly. But we hit something far more difficult. We hit the future. We hit a chain of events that had not happened yet, but that we knew would happen because we understood the physics and we understood your responses. That is not trickery. That is thinking further ahead than you believed possible. The chamber was completely silent. Let me tell you how our ancestors survived on Earth, continued. They were small, they were weak. They faced predators with teeth and claws and speed, and they won, not by being stronger but by being smarter. They dug pits and covered them with branches. They herded animals toward cliffs. They created situations where their enemies defeated themselves. This is what we are. This is how we think. And this is what we offer the coalition. Al's voice was bitter. And what happens when you turn this thinking against us? We have no intention of doing so. Humanity wants allies, not subjects. We want to contribute to the coalition, not dominate it. But you asked what we can offer, and the answer is a perspective that none of you have. A way of solving problems that does not occur to species who evolved as apex predators with natural weapons. We are the trap builders. We are the long-term planners. We are the ones who see the whole board while others focus on individual pieces. Raised his hand for silence. I call for a vote. The motion is to grant humanity full combat status within the coalition, with special designation as tactical warfare specialists. All in favor. The vote was not unanimous. Al and several allied delegations voted against, but the majority supported the motion. Humanity was now a full member of the coalition's military structure. After the session ended, the chamber slowly emptied. Found himself standing near the observation window, looking out at the stars. Joined him. The fleet commander wants to give me a medal, she said. The Coalition Medal of Precision. You earned it. The citation says that every shot I fired during the entire exercise hit exactly what I intended. She smiled slightly. I like that. Not that I hit the most targets, that I hit what I intended. Nodded. That is the difference they are finally starting to understand. Footsteps approached. Al stood behind them, his four eyes studying the humans with an expression that had changed from contempt to something more complicated. I want to understand, the ambassador said quietly. How did your species develop this way of thinking? How did you learn to see what no one else sees? Consider the question carefully before answering. On Earth, our ancestors once brought down creatures 100 times their size, not by being stronger, not by being faster, but by being patient enough to build the trap and clever enough to make the prey walk into it. He turned to face Al directly. We are not dangerous because of what we shoot at, Ambassador. We are dangerous because of what we do not shoot at. Because while you are watching our weapons, you are not watching everything else. And everything else is where the real threat lives. Al was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head in what recognized as a gesture of respect. Perhaps, the ambassador said, we have more to learn from each other than I believed. He walked away, leaving the humans alone at the window. Looked out at the distant stars. Do you think they really understand now? Watched a coalition ship drift past, its running lights blinking against the darkness. Some of them do, the rest will learn. One way or another they will all learn. And somewhere out in the galaxy, other species were already hearing the story of how a group of humans had defeated an unbeatable fleet without firing a single shot at their enemies. The story would spread and grow. And slowly, the galaxy would come to understand a simple truth. The most dangerous thing about humanity was not what they aimed at. It was everything they did not seem to aim at. Because for humans, every target was connected to every other target. Every shot was part of a larger plan. And by the time you realized what they were really shooting at, it was already far too late.